Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 2 of Apple TV's Ted Lasso, entitled Lavender. Now, this show is making interesting choices, I think, with their show titles, because last week's one was Goodbye Earl, which is tied to the whole situation with the dog. And this one's tied to a brief situation involving Nate chewing out his replacement over lavender scented towels. And yeah, I'm curious why they make these episode title choices, because the dog thing wasn't the most important thing of that episode, and this lavender thing with Nate wasn't the most important thing of this episode. It was like a footnote. So I'm interested why they chose that title. I do think that we're going in an interesting direction with Nate, and it was one of the thoughts that I was gonna pose at the end, but since I'm already talking about it, I'll just do it now. But I'm curious where they're going with Nate, because we see Nate's being kind of a dick to his replacement, and no one's addressed it yet. But there's been glances, like I feel like that in episode 1 there was a moment where Ted and Coach Beer kind of looked at each other, and then I feel like Coach Beer made a face after the whole lavender towel situation, and I'm wondering where this is going. Like, is this because there's sometimes where I kind of feel like they're playing it for laughs, and then they'll have that moment where like somebody will make a face, kind of like like they're noting Nate's behavior, and yeah, I'm curious where that's gonna go. I think it's gonna be pretty interesting wherever it goes, but currently I don't like this for Nate, which is not a knock against the show. I think it's an interesting I think it's a good thing for his character from that perspective. I think it's interesting, but for the Nate character, it's like, oh, I don't like seeing him like that, because I mean, look, like, we loved Nate last season, man. Like, what? Like, I don't want to see Nate being an asshole, but no, it's interesting where they're going. So I'm curious to see how long this is gonna go on before Ted or Coach Beard says something to Nate about his behavior. But anyway, I thought this was a really good episode. I really love this show. Like, I feel like a bad Ted Lasso episode. This is by the way, this is when you know you have a really good show, particularly something with an ensemble cast like this. I feel like with this show, you could have an episode that maybe isn't that interesting, or maybe even isn't that funny, and you will still enjoy your time with these people. And I think that's part of the reason why that can essentially never happen, because these people, this group, is so captivating. Like, they're so fun to watch, and it just kind of feels like you're at home. Like, I put in the description for episode 1, I said, isn't it great to be, back in the world of Ted Lasso? And it is. Like, I like spending time with these characters, and I think that's a very undervalued compliment to give a television show. Like, people talk about, the acting on shows, or the character development, or the plot, or whatever, right? But I enjoy, and this is the same thing, I'm gonna continue to compare this show to Schitt's Creek. I enjoy spending time with these characters. It's like, oh, new episode of Ted Lasso, time to go kick it, hang out with some friends and people that I enjoy and that I like watching. So I think that's a really good compliment to give this show. And even if you did have a bad episode, I still feel like, again, I couldn't even really call it a bad episode. How bad of an episode could you have with such an enjoyable cast of characters that have all earned a fuck ton of Emmy nominations, I should say. But yeah, it was a good episode. I think there was a good mixture of plot development, kind of, plot issues, things that we know are going to be like a through line throughout the season, combined with some of the good laughs that we expect. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I liked, and I'm going to give some thoughts at the end, because of course there's nothing I didn't like, because this show is incredible. I really like Roy as an analyst. Like, I'm glad that they had Keeley push him on that, because when she mentioned in episode 1, I thought, oh, that'd be really cool to have Roy as an analyst, or as a pundit, as they apparently say there. We call them pundits here too, but I thought that'd be really cool. So I was glad that Keeley kind of pushed him on that, and it was good. I mean, it was a brief scene, but I really liked the line that he gave, where he said something like, he said Chelsea looked like terrified kids waiting in line for a handsy Santa Claus. I thought that was a really good line. But yeah, I'm really gonna enjoy going forward. Hopefully this will remain a thing where we'll get like a Roy doing his analytical thing on TV. Like, I hope we get something like that every week. Like, that'd be really cool. But It should actually, and it should even be particularly more interesting now that it looks like Jamie is going to be back on Richmond. So, we saw at the end of last week, Roy still hates Jamie. We saw him hate watching that reality show. What was it called? Lust conquers all, or lust. I don't know. It had lust in the name. I don't fucking know. But we saw him hate watching that show, and he's really even hard to call it hate watching because he looked very happy. But so now that we're gonna have to, well, he's gonna have to essentially give commentary or analysis on Jamie and Richmond. I think that's going to be really interesting too going forward. So, and then there's going to be also, and this is just entering my mind right now. It's going to be really interesting too, the fact that since Roy's not on the team, but Keely still is. Keely's going to be interacting with essentially her ex in a place where Roy, her current man, is not around. So I wonder if that's going to cause some issues too, because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I feel like Keely really loves Roy, but I also feel like there's still something there for Jamie, and that could end up being something awkward. And I don't like that for Roy. Like Roy, I see a lot of myself in Roy. Like he doesn't like shit, man. Like Roy is so fucking angry all the time, and he just expresses it outwardly more often than I do. But like, I feel like Roy is like my spirit animal. But I'm going to talk about Jamie a little bit more in a minute. But one of the other things that I like is now this dynamic between Ted and this therapist. I forget her name, but it looks like he's going to be around probably for the season. So I'll probably have it by next week. My brain is saying Stacy, but I don't know. It is hard. He always addresses her as Doc, so it's hard for me to even really pick up the name. But I really like this dynamic because you could tell that Ted doesn't. I don't want to say doesn't like, because he doesn't even seem like a guy who dislikes things. But you could tell it's he's uncomfortable with the idea of this therapist doing something with his team that he can't. And then he also seems uncomfortable with the fact that he has things that he wants to talk about, but he just doesn't really know how to share. And they have a good moment in the therapist's office where Ted does a pretty good comparison when she's talking about she doesn't eat sugar, and he says something. He compares the video games, and he says something to the effect of like, I thought I was way too into video games, so I stopped playing video games altogether. And I figured that would make me happier, but now I realize I'm just not doing something I enjoy instead of adjusting my relationship to it. And I thought that was a pretty profound analysis of cutting oneself off from something that they enjoy. And then he sits down and the therapist tells him, like, this, like, I see what you're doing here. Like, she saw through it. Like, this is how you, like, disarm people. And it's charming, but it's not working on her. And I think that's disarming for him, to have a situation where his natural charm doesn't work on someone. So it's going to be real interesting, particularly now that Jamie's there, because Jamie's going to cause, it's going to be like oil and water. Like Jamie's going to cause issues, even though I suspect Jamie's going to be better than he was last season as far as like his behavior, but he's still going to cause issues, and we're going to have Ted struggling to fix them, and the therapist watching from the stands and slowly moving down closer to the field, observing this. And I think that's going to make for a great dynamic throughout the season as well. And then also how they're going to play off the idea of Ted needing to talk to her and struggling with it, and Rebecca needing to talk to her and struggling with it. So they did a really good job in this episode in particular of setting up the direction that the show is going to go for the remainder of the season. It's like episode 1 kind of felt like, here's where we are. Here's everybody that you miss. Here's what they're currently doing and dealing with. And just, hey, here they are again. Say hi. This episode felt like, okay, now I have an idea of where we're going here. And I really like the direction with the therapist. I really like the direction with Jamie. I really like the direction with Roy. So, like, they're doing some really good stuff that I'm excited to see. So, now that I've talked about the other things that I wanted to point out, I'm going to talk about Jamie a little bit. So we find out that Jamie got kicked off of his reality show. He can't go back to his team. So now he has nowhere to go. He has nothing to do. He stalks Keely and essentially asked her about the idea of returning to Richmond. She says, wrong person. And he goes and talks to Ted. Ted says no, and then talks with Sam and changes his mind because of the idea of giving someone a second chance. And I think that this is going to be really good for the show because, one, Jamie's just like, Jamie is an obnoxious character, but an obnoxious character on this show, I think, is good for the chemistry of this show. So I was concerned that we wouldn't get too much of Jamie, because after Jamie left the team in season 1, we saw him far less. And then now I'm thinking, like, coming into season 2, I didn't even know if he was going to be on the show. And then when they just pop him in that final scene, I'm like, okay, he's clearly on the show, but how much of him are we going to see? Bringing him back to the team when the team is in a good mental space, but not in a good space for winning games. Bring him back to the team. I guarantee you they're going to start winning games, but their team chemistry, the locker room, the feeling there is going to be off. And I mean, it's going to be on Ted and this therapist to fix it. And I think it's going to be a good dynamic for the show. So I'm really excited to have Jamie back. I'm hoping that Keely does. I'm hoping I'm wrong about Keely and that she doesn't do anything with him. It's like, man, you can't help but like Roy, even though he's an asshole. No one wants to see Roy get hurt because it's so important to him that he doesn't show vulnerability. So, fuck, I kind of just talked myself into thinking that they're probably going to do it by making him, like, they're going to have to make him show vulnerability by maybe hopefully just getting jealous and not Keely ever actually doing anything with Jamie. But I'm concerned about that. But again, really good episode. A couple of things that I thought were pretty funny at the end, or things that not at the end, but things that I noticed too. Is it me, or does Jamie look a lot older? And I think it's the hair, the hairstyle for him, and maybe like the eyebrow cuts or whatever he was doing. But Jamie looked a lot older to me for some reason. I already talked about Nate. That was one of the things that I had in my thoughts to ask you guys what you think the show is going to do with Nate, what direction they're going there. So you can drop that in the comments. And then lastly, there were a lot of funny moments in this episode. I really liked when Roy sped off, when Ted starts to run up to the car. Because I was wondering this whole time, I'm like, oh, is Ted going to come up and talk to Roy? We're going to have a nice little Ted-Roy interaction. And you just hear, and he just speeds off. I thought that was good. I loved when they called the therapist bike a transformer and were totally blown away by it, which I also was. I'm like, holy shit, that bike folds up to like a size of a briefcase. Like, wow, that's pretty fucking cool. I was impressed by that too. I really liked when Roy came back after the end of the little girls' season that he was coaching, and he remarked something like, we would have lost by less if they hadn't taken away this goal for headers because 9-year-olds can't do headers, and he goes, fucking brain development. I thought that was such a great line, and it's so in line with Roy as a character as well. I thought that was really funny. Like I mentioned earlier, the therapist moving closer in the stands. I thought that line was funny without her moving, and then when he looked back and she had moved, it just made it even funnier. I like what Ted said that there's a Twitter account for his mustache, because they do that on Twitter, make accounts for body parts of a person or some sort of distinguishing characteristic. And I totally believe that is not something that they made up. I believe that there probably was a Twitter account for Ted Lasso's mustache, and if there wasn't, there is now. So I thought that was cool. And then I like what I mentioned earlier, Roy's line about the handsy Santa Claus. But again, really good episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this show, and now I'm really interested in what you guys think about the directions of these plot lines. Do you agree with me that this is probably where the show is going? And if so, what do you think about that direction? And if not, where do you think the show is going? So drop that in the comments, share the video, watch the other videos I got on here. Man, I got some bangers, so check those out. Pretty much anything you want. You can feel free to suggest something too. And I'll see you guys next week for episode 3. Peace.